Hello guys and welcome back to the SimpliCode programming channel. This is Vikesh and let's get started with today's topic, which is about interfaces in Java. Now again, let's understand what do we mean by an interface in general, and then we will see how do we apply the concept of interfaces in Java. So imagine, let's take the same example of vehicle industry because that's something which we see every day around ourselves and we can relate to it. So imagine if all the car manufacturers were creating a different way of driving a car. What if in one car you have a steering, but in other car you do not have a steering, but you have something else, which may be called something else. In one car you have the gas pedal to speed up. In other car, you have a button to speed up. Similarly, in one car, you may have different kind of doors, and in other car, you may have different kind of doors, which are completely different looking. It's not even a single simple handle to open it. So you see the problem here. The problem here is that all the car manufacturers are not working on a single contract. They are not respecting a single interface, which will create a poor user experience because whenever the users have to buy a new car or they have to switch from one manufacturer to other manufacturer, they are completely clueless as to how to drive that particular class because the interface they were using in the previous car is completely different from the interface they are being shown in the other car. And that's the basic need for the concept of interface. Think of it as a contract agreement. You see, it is also mentioned here that if we apply the same kind of concept to programming world, imagine if every programmer was writing their own logic in their own way without following a single contract or a single guideline. Soon it is going to create a problem. And that's the kind of problem interfaces try to solve. So interface is again a keyword in Java, and the basic idea or the basic construct is that the interfaces are going to define the specifications of how a class would act. Let me repeat this in a more generic way. Interfaces are going to define the contract or the specification which is going to govern how an application or code or programming logic will behave. That's the basic idea of interfaces. So interfaces are their own type, and the basic property of interface is that it can only contain constants, method declarations similar to abstract classes, and some default methods or static methods or nested types. What is nested type? We will cover that later. Default methods we'll touch upon a bit here, and the static methods as well. But the basic idea is that when you create an interface in Java, you cannot write anything concrete in terms of the behavior of the interface. When I say behavior, always think of that as method. So you cannot define a concrete method in an interface. You can only declare methods. You can also declare constants. You can create a particular type of concrete method by using the default keyword, but use it in very special circumstances. You can also create static methods as well, which are only going to belong to the interface and nobody else. Now let's look at an example. And also before we go to the example, let me also phrase this here that if an interface cannot define a concrete implementation of the methods, then naturally the interface is going to be extended by a child class, a concrete class, which is going to provide the implementation of the methods declared in the interface. It does sound like abstract classes, but there is a difference. Let's understand the difference with the help of an example. This is how an interface will look like. I've used the same construct of bicycle and mountain bike just to maintain some continuity and less context switching. But this is how an interface will look like. You will not use the class keyword, but instead of that, you will use the interface keyword. You can only declare methods. You cannot define methods. Remember when we looked at the abstract classes example, we were able to define concrete methods as well. But in interface, that's a strict no-no. You cannot define concrete methods. Let me show you the abstract class in the case of abstraction which we used. This was the abstract class and it did have a concrete method, right? But bicycle.java here, which is because it's an interface, it is not going to allow you to create a concrete method. Another thing is that if you try to declare a variable inside the class, they will have to be constant. You cannot just declare them without any value. For example, I cannot do this. If I do this, it is going to give an error. You see an error here. and it says initialize field X at declaration, something like this, public static final. So interface is going to force you to declare all the variables as public static final with some value if you try to use them inside interface. So that is also something which interface will mandate. So you see, interfaces are more strict. They are more strict in terms of what you can do. You can only declare public static final variables, and you can only declare methods. You cannot define methods. So abstract class is less restrictive. Interface is more restrictive. And that is the differentiation which we have to keep in mind, whether to use abstract classes or whether to use interfaces. That is also a very common confusing question in the interviews as well. And remember that interfaces are only for contracts or specifications, where in case of abstract class, you can write a concrete behavior as well in terms of a concrete method in the base class. Interfaces, there's no concrete implementation in the base class. Abstract classes, yes, there can be a concrete implementation in the base class. That's the basic difference. Moving on, I have created a child class here, which is again mountain bike, and it has three properties: seat height, gear, and speed, similar to the previous example. It has a constructor, and remember, again, interfaces cannot be initialized directly, so you do not even need to call a super method here because there is nothing to initialize. You initialize a class to create a state. State is denoted by the properties, but interfaces will force you to write a public static final property and initialize its value automatically. So you do not need a constructor for the interface because there is nothing to initialize. Everything has been initialized in terms of the variables, and the methods are anywhere just declared. That's why you don't need to call super here. After that, the moment you write this particular keyword here, implements, and that is how you will basically extend from the interface. You will use the implements bicycle keyword here. Implements is the keyword and bicycle is the name of the interface. If you write this here, then Java is going to force you to provide the implementation of these two methods. If I do this implements bicycle, and if I comment out these two methods, which is coming from the base class, it is going to give an error. And if I read out this error, it says either you add the unimplemented methods or you make the mountain bike class as abstract. There are two ways to fix this particular class. Similar to abstract classes, it will force you to write the implementation of the base class declared methods. Another thing which Java will suggest you and will also force you via some IDEs as well is that you use this particular annotation. We use this particular annotation to tell Java that we are overriding this method from the base class. Since apply break and speed up methods were defined here in the base class, and this child class is supposed to provide the implementation of the methods by overriding them. Overriding is again a concept which we will talk about in detail in the coming sessions. But for now, remember that you need to write this annotation here on the methods which have been taken from the base class to provide an implementation. And the implementation is similar to what we have seen before. So whatever value you supply in the apply break, the speed is going to get decremented by that particular value. And in case of speed up, whatever value you supply in the argument, that value is going to be added to the current speed, and the speed is going to go up. Let's look at the main class here, which is called interface demo. It has a public static void main method. And here I'm again initializing the child class. Nothing strange here. And then I'm using the getter method here because I have made everything as private here. And rest of the things are just here as is. I have the getters and setters here for all the properties, and I'm using those here. So I'm using the getters to just get the value of gear, seat height, and speed, and then I'm applying the brake, and then I'm printing the current speed after applying the brakes. Let me just expand this a bit more. And then I'm using the speed up method, trying to increase the current speed of the bike by 10, and then printing the new speed again. So using the apply brake and speed up methods, which are concretely defined in the child class by using this override annotation. And these were the methods which were declared in the interface, in the base interface. And that's all which is happening in this particular class. Let's run this particular program. And these are the values I get. I get the gear as 1, which is coming from here. I get the seat height as 20, which is coming from here. I get the current bike speed as 10. This was the value which it was initialized with. Then I'm applying the brake, and after applying the brake, the speed of the bike gets reduced and it becomes 10 minus 1, which becomes 9, and that's what gets printed here. And then I'm speeding up the bike by 10. So the current value of the speed of the bike is 9. And if I incremented it by 10, it becomes 19. And that's what gets printed here. And that's all I want to cover in this particular session, where we had a look at an example of how we can use interfaces in Java and how we can use interfaces with the concept of inheritance. And in the next session, we are going to have a look at the concept of multiple inheritance using interfaces. If you like this video, a thumbs up would be massively appreciated, and please don't forget to subscribe to SimpliCode for more programming related videos. Thank you, and we'll meet again in the next session.